Hello and welcome to another Queen interview. I'm here with my dear, dear friend of nearly 30 years, Joanne Lee. And Joanne has had a 27-year career as a business and personal coach, a trainer, and workshop leader. And she has helped countless small businesses in the Olympia area launch into their magnificence through a nonprofit called Enterprise for Equity. And in 2013, Joanne had her embodied consciousness awakening and has been a Trillium Awakening teacher for 8 years. And she's also a gifted visual artist and writer. She has published a book on a creative writing process. And the title of the book is Create: How to Access Depth Creativity, Divine Guidance, and Universal Wisdom at Will. And I'll put the title of her book in the show notes and some links so you can find out more about that. And Joanna has been a beloved collaborator and co-conspirator. We have taught so many things together. We also paddleboard together. And best of all is Joanne is a 10-minute walk from my house, which I don't know if it gets much better than that. So here I'm sharing with you one of my favorite people on the planet.
Thank you so much, Margit.
Yeah, it's great having you here. So there's a lot that I want to sort of cover, sort of broad brushstroke here. We might have to do it. I'm sure we'll have to do another interview. No question about that. But just to get us started, I'm just curious how you see yourself within the quadruple goddess model of maiden, mother, queen, crone. And what's your relationship to that model? How you see yourself and your queenhood now? You're about 10 years older than me. So, there's part of me that's vicariously listening about your development and sense of self. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, the revelation or recognition of Queen was really surprising and enormous and welcome. So my maidenhood and my motherhood were predictable, expected, I suppose, in the sense that I'd always worked from that three that model of three, maiden, mother, crone. And then, when I started having children quite young, and so when motherhood was really over in the sense of it being a full-time activity or demanding a lot from me, I was quite young, and I was in my 40s, and I like trying to fit myself into crone was awkward in many ways. So it was awkward because of the culture that I live in and the way we hold crone, hag, as negative terms. And I didn't feel particularly old, and I associated croneness with oldness, but I didn't have anything to fill the gap until you brought this notion of queen to the community and to me. And so to some degree now, I it's a retrospective. I can look back and say, oh my gosh, yeah, I transitioned into queen really probably not too long after I moved here to Olympia. So, 25, 30 years ago was, I think, the beginning of my queening, the beginning of my before that, I had a lot been in survival mode, raising two children on my own and my work and, acquiring educational degrees. And so when I moved here, I could look out into the community and I felt community had always been really important to me, but it had been a little bit harder for me, both in where I lived, but also in my lifestyle. It had been harder for me to make sense of it or really engage it in a meaningful way. To some degree, I had started that in my, later 30s and early 40s, but boy, Olympia just provided me with um, phenomenal opportunities, and not the least of which was Sustainable Community Roundtable, which was a little nonprofit that in some ways is the reason that I settled in Olympia because I met Dorothy Craig, the founder of that organization, and I just, it just absolutely opened my mind and to possibilities. A city that talked about sustainability, a city that was committed, the first sustainable city in Washington. And whether that has been actualized or how well that's been actualized is a different conversation. But that hook was there. And so there was this turning from mother, which was a very um, it was inclusive in the sense that there were my children, there was family, there were other, there was community around motherhood, but it just opened me up to um, a different way of being in the world. So, but again, I didn't have that context for it as it was happening. I mean, I loved my life and I was doing what I wanted to do, and it all felt very good. And the crone thing was still sort of hanging out there, like, am I a crone? I guess. I don't know. And then, when the queen thing came, I mean, at first, I think I felt some resistance in the way many women might. I don't know what your experience has been, but queen, like, it felt like a stepping in a way that was, um, for me, important and timely. I don't think I would have been as comfortable with it at the front end, but being more towards the back end, closer to crone or already crone, and being able to look back and say, oh, yeah, that is what happened. And it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with monarchy and, all of that baggage that comes with some of what we've experienced culturally as queens and kings.
Mhm. Yeah, and we were talking earlier about how much you've contributed to the Olympia community. The ripple effect of all these beautiful small businesses coming into, the ecosystem, the economic and social ecosystem here in Olympia, and then this sustainable roundtable. I was working with you a little bit back then. You hired me to create the community money, the design for the sound hour money, a local currency project. And so I think that's part of what I see as um, the contribution of Queen is in service to the collective,
Mhm.
not dominating the collective, but in service to, right? And stepping the game up somehow, kind of bringing out to the best of our ability, bringing out the best of others, right? And
Yeah, absolutely. Like having the vision, like I've always identified as a visionary and I've always identified as an initiator. Um, I certainly have gotten better as life has gone on to completing things. That wasn't always a strength when I was younger, but my energy was demanded in so many different directions. I can be kinder and more generous to myself now. Um, but definitely seeing a need. What is this need in the community? And then getting it rolling, which has been my MO for a couple of decades at least now. So the Sound Hours was the first, and that was exhilarating it was just so fun. It was just such a fun project to print our own money and then watch community coalesce around it. Some of my dear friends are still people I met through that project. You included, the artist for the bills. Um, yeah, and then Enterprise for Equity followed fairly shortly. And I came into the organization. I didn't initiate it, but I came into it very early on and was able to um, be a co-author and co-creator of the curriculum that we still use to this day, like 20 years later. And then I have had, in some ways, that segment or that thread in my life feels like sort of both queen and mother, because I do feel a sort of mothering of these new businesses, and they're launching into the world. And it did start just in Olympia. Now it's all over the Pacific Northwest in terms of Washington State, 9 counties, I think, um, that we offer services in. Yeah, and then my create work came during this period. And again, you know, first feeling its power and value in my own life, and then offering it to others and watching people just light up with the tool, with the potential there. My coaching business, which has been my mainstay in terms of supporting myself and also serving the community, not just here locally, but wherever clients came from, sometimes in the early days on the phone and then later on Zoom, but lots in person. And then more recently, just because of this event that I attended last night, the Paul Stamets, Mike Bugh talk, Olympia Psychedelic Society, like recognizing through a friend and being introduced to Portland Psychedelic Society through a friend slash teacher, and thinking, wow, doesn't Olympia need that? And initiating it. And I don't take credit for what it is, because I got I got kind of bored after about a year. It wasn't moving fast enough. I still have that deadly flaw. Like things have gotta happen. But it is thriving now, and it is serving a purpose for a lot of people, which is very gratifying. Yeah.
It seems like that's part of the transition from mother to queen is that orientation away from the immediate family to nurturing and building in the world. Um, and sometimes people reach sort of this tipping point into queenhood at a kind of plateau in their career
Mm.
where there can be sort of a crisis of meaning, like, okay, I've got all the money or whatever, got my career, I've done the thing, and it's not really that satisfying. There's got to be more meaning in life than this. It's sort of like a quasi midlife crisis that can sometimes coincide with menopause. But there's a way in which I'm hearing you sort of shift into the meaning of, what is it, servant leadership in a way early, like you. And that's my experience of you, is you're always like way ahead of the curve. You're in the Teachers Association, you're kind of dragging us to the evolutionary edge. So I just kind of struck by that. The other thing is initiating projects can be seen as masculine, like get it done. What's your take on what your sense is of the difference between the masculine drive to make things happen versus a more queenly, feminine way of serving community and uh, giving birth to things in the collective?
Yeah, great question. I definitely have seen myself through the years with with yang energy, and I have that component. And although I think I've always had the yin and the feminine, I couldn't really recognize it as much in myself, even though, as a mother and doing those kinds of things. I mean, I had to be both, I guess, in that arena. And maybe that's why the feminine wasn't as clear to me. Like, how do I embody that? Um, yeah, so in initiating projects, definitely there is that yang energy coming forth, the vision. Um, I think having a concurrent um, coaching practice, being trained as a coach, having a natural inclination that I recognized, and then being trained uh, initially for 2 years and then other trainings later, gave me a way of being much more receptive. So I had to be receptive to clients, and I, or I guess I didn't have to, but I chose to, and it worked well. And developing and cultivating my own empathy. And so I think that came into then the work that I was doing in the world, where I didn't feel a lot of ownership, like this thing has to happen this way in some of the projects, in some of the cases. Like I was certainly willing to, as you said, be the servant, you know. I did have communitarian, I have had communitarian inclinations as long as I can remember, back to my young adulthood, including leaving the country with a group of people to go, live on a commune in Belize. Like it's been a deep and compelling need, I think. I was going to say urge, but really need in me. And so it's been satisfied to a large degree by the various communities that I am a part of here in Olympia, some that I helped build and some that I was just fortunate enough to fall into, like Trillium, for instance. Um, so those needs have gotten satisfied. So periodically I come back to this the sacred feminine, the deep feminine, and sort of meet her in me in new ways. And I'm in one of those phases right now of coming back around. And um, what does it mean? What does that mean in my life now? How do I embody that? And how do I serve that? How do I serve that elemental causal force in the universe?
Well, it seems like, uh, right, there's the vision masculine task part that can get projects launched and completed. And then there's this attunement to need, right? So what's missing here?
Mhm.
What's the need that isn't being met? And that's, to me, feels kind of like a feminine response, responding to needs.
Yes.
In the collective, coaching one-on-one with that individual, or in the ecosystem, the sustainability, the need of the collective to fit into the larger body of which we are a part. Speaking of body, I'm curious how, uh, in 2013, you had your embodied awakening, how spiritual awakening fits into your experience of queenhood and expression of queenhood. It's a big question.
It is a big question. Yeah, so I think that through my life, I had these threads, the communitarian thread, the service, um, wanting to help, which probably went from a not very healthy drama triangle kind of orientation and impulse based on my own trauma history into healthier versions of that. Um, but I don't think it was until my awakening, my embodied awakening, that I really dropped into the capacity in a very different way. And it changed everything. It changed the way I coached. It changed, what I was interested in and willing to invest time in. Um, just changed my way of being in the world. And I would have, because of my physicality and my interests in, dance and biking and getting out in the woods and hiking and all of those things, I think I saw myself as embodied at some level when I wasn't. And because I had no comparison, right? And so when the embodiment came for me, it came on the energetic level and heart level, which was totally unexpected and shocking, really. It was a shock. It was a shock to my system. Um, but it just kind of flipped everything for me. So from, pre-awakening, um, feeling a rightness and a um, kind of right livelihood. I'd been concerned about purpose and right livelihood. And, um, so my life had those elements that were propelling me, but it wasn't until the embodied awakening that all of a sudden that was like, uh, incidental in a way, because then I could come from love. Then it was the reality of this is all there is. And so from the outside, my activities might not have looked much different, but from the inside, it was completely a different experience. And so how does that relate to Queen? Again, that notion wasn't with me in 2013. Um, and I think in an archetypical way that a queen operates from love for her domain, love for her people, love for her. So it's not so much about what she does as it is what she brings as this safe space and holding of an entire, whatever it is, community or culture. Um, so when I look back now, I can see how that shifted in me. And of course, it took me some years to reconfigure and for that to begin to come through in my daily life and um, my actions. Yeah.
As I'm with you in this reflection of what does embodied awakening give queens, I'm just feeling the presence that comes with it. I love what you said about uh, that wide embrace
Mm,
with the heart. So compassion, openness, and the gaze that doesn't turn away. You're gazing into the world,
mhm,
and that capacity of presence to be with, to be in relationship with, and not be crumbled, right?
mm,
Not be crumbled by it.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an elevation of motherhood. It goes from mothering in a more turned inward way to the capacity to, that thread continues on and it opens into this larger um, kind of beautiful combination of vision and commitment and love and responsiveness. So all those terms that I think of, or most of those terms I think of as feminine, the sacred feminine, the receptivity. Yeah.
And what sort of things helped you have your embodied spiritual awakening? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I was not a dedicated practitioner of anything except the create the right process that I teach. And I was a dedicated practitioner of that. I don't think I understood, again, in the middle of it, as I was experiencing it, I don't think I was aware of how powerful it was in transforming me and in priming me for spiritual awakening. I certainly brought a spiritual orientation and approach to it, and many of my early rites were, I mean, they were all over the place, but certainly a lot of them had to do with a spiritual intention, as well as I could um, compose that. But I also would write about my health, and I'd write about relationships, and I'd write about um, my business. I used it in the launching of my coaching practice. So I used it, I saw it as a very practical tool. But the spirituality found its way in, not just found its way in, I think maybe found its way out. Like this gave me an opportunity to explore that stuff. Um, and my relationship with my own spirit or soul in a way that I never had before. I just wasn't a regular meditator. I wasn't attracted to particular spiritual paths. I was a dilettante. I read a lot, I looked at a lot of them and just didn't feel like anything felt like home until Waking Down Trillium showed up. And even then I was resistant. But I think the create work and also the transmission that landed and became embedded in Olympia so quickly through you and Dawn and bringing teachers in. Like I think the combination of the transmission and this ballast that I had uncovered and developed through the create rites um, got me through that initial, first of all, the awakening, and then the sacred reconfiguration, which was, well, the rot, starting with the rot, and then, through the sacred reconfiguration, which of course still goes on. Um, yeah, I felt for the first time in my life, probably, that I could relax into. So relax into the community, relax into the spiritual path, and relax into my own being and capacity. And um, yeah.
Having joined you for many create rites and done some of my own, I mean, what blows me away, especially when we do it in a group setting, is like, what is it? What's the title again? Depth, creativity, divine guidance, universal wisdom at will. The wisdom and the truth. So these elements of truth come out onto the paper from a place that's beyond the local ego mind.
Mhm.
There's the collective unconscious, but there's even the deeper unconscious and deep intelligence. And when we have this embodied awakening, what we're awakening into is the deeper truth
Mhm.
of life. And here you've been tapping into this, the deeper truth has been bleeding into the page. So some part of you must have been resonating and becoming susceptible to the deeper truth. So I just love that you kind of created your own pathway.
Ramp. I had an on-ramp.
You had
Yeah.
your own on ramp, and then Trillium just kind of helped the you come in for the landing.
Yep. Very much so.
You bring up a good point about how, prior to embodied awakening, we have this period of unraveling that we sometimes call in Trillium the rot, which is sort of a colorful way of saying our strategies and survival mechanisms and efforts to create stability or safety or success, all of that striving and managing the discomfort of life, those start to crumble and rot, right? The things that we really held on to. I'm curious what your take is on why, what funk, how that helps us more fully express our queenhood to have to go through that falling apart disintegration process. You know what I'm saying?
I do. And, the immediate image I got was a queen who hasn't done that and how she would show up in the world, which would be more, I mean, I don't want to make judgments about the British monarchy because I've never been very interested in them or paid a lot of attention to them. But the image that I have or the vision that I have is someone who's sort of ruling with a tight fist and, um, is not coming from a heart-centered or genuine place and whose truth is more about the centuries of lineage and ancestry and that things have to be done a certain way and blah blah blah. Yeah, so I think that the rot, the unraveling is what of course prepares us for the drop into embodied awakening and mutuality. I think it's what prepares or accelerates the queen's journey in the sense of all of the hindrances and restrictions, not all, you know, many of the hindrances, restrictions, limitations, and rigidity and armoring get loosened up, get softened up. And of course, it didn't happen for me overnight. And I don't think it happens for most people overnight. But as they soften up, then, what I might call the genuine queen has a place to emerge and a place to blossom. And the truths that can come through then are deeper truths, are those both, yeah, collective and deeper truths for the individual. Um, otherwise we're left sort of scrambling and scrabbling and doing things the old way, which didn't work. It doesn't work. And when we finally trust enough and can let go enough, then I've always resisted the cliche in the flow, but I've never come up with anything better either. So when we can kind of let go of the banks or the log in the middle of the river, and then we can be in the flow, and there's a beauty, it's vulnerable and it's risky, and it's also beautiful and so much more satisfying way of being.
Yeah, instead of trying to control and manage life, there's sort of a dance response call, sort of a call and response of offering our action and then seeing how life responds and then flowing back and forth, and
Mhm.
not a whip or, like you say, the rigidity or, grasping onto the illusion of control and um, trying to dominate people's situations, etc.,
Yeah.
and not perpetuating the systems that have brought us here to the brink that we're standing at.
Mhm.
Speaking of which, so you were one of my beloved test readers of my upcoming new essay, the 5 dimensions of awakening for queens. And in that essay, I talk about, awakening to consciousness, our infinite nature, awakening to our embodied, bringing spirit and matter together in this embodied awakening that you've been talking about. But then I also talk about social dimensions of awakening. So just because we have embodied awakening doesn't mean we automatically drop all the conditioning
Mhm.
that has been imprinted not only in our body, but in the DNA and the ancestral imprinting. And
Mhm.
so there's a way in which systems of oppression are in our bodies, and we perpetuate and participate in societal systems of injustice. So there's that social dimension of awakening. And in mutuality, we talk about, part of Trillium is mutuality. And we tend to focus one on one and how do we relate to each other, which is really important and a great workout. But then there's this broader mutuality with our beloveds in community and the people we can't stand in community. We're in relationship. The
Mhm.
fourth dimension of awakening is going even further, is ecological awakening, awakening to our embeddedness in the natural world. So even though whole being realization or embodied consciousness realization, we recognize the unity, right? The unity of life, that non-separate nature. But still, we can be blind to how much our lifestyle is impacting the planet and and our indigenous belongingness
Mhm.
to the natural world. We're disconnected from, and we need to awaken to. And then the fifth and final dimension that I put in sort of my model is soul level of awakening. So there's infinite consciousness, there's the body, And then somewhere in between is this sort of spark of consciousness that's looking through our eyes and has access, like through your create right. If we access the soul, and the soul comes through the create right process, the depth writing process, accesses purpose, the bigger plan for your lifetime, your nature, what you're here to do and be. And then it also links to the, human endeavor as a
Mhm.
whole. So I'm just curious, you know, I saw you that you saw the rough draft, just your take on that and how that's alive for you and in your queening. Just curious
Mhm.
just to hear your take.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love so much about you and appreciate about you is it's the kind of zoom out. It's like your capacity to see the really big picture and then put it, into a model or articulate it in a way that is accessible, um, and evolves. Like I think it's evolving. I think this is evolving the Trillium path in, this particular way. Um, yeah, so there's something about seeing a big picture, and then there's something about discriminating the parts, and your capacity to discriminate the parts is useful for me because I can sometimes see, or maybe even better to say, feel a big picture, and then to be able to take it apart and look at, oh, this is how this fits with this, fits with this, fits with this. Um, as an overlay on my own life and perspective. So yeah, so the consciousness awakening, the embodied awakening, I think our path was really clear and helpful and useful for me in recognizing those. Even, yeah. And then the social dimension of awakening, I think is I think it's particularly critical at this time in the world, and I think that for it to be meaningful or real, I guess, for it to be real, it requires uh, that previous conscious and embodied awakening and recognition of non-separateness, because otherwise it's too easy or convenient or preferable to see that as out there somewhere and not relevant. And what does it have to do with me? And so when there's a recognition of non-separateness, I am my community. I am social. I am the social life of this community and the world. Um, and again, as a queen, like if a queen doesn't have that orientation, then I was hearing something just very recently about all the fiefdoms in Ireland, whatever, 1,000, 1,500 years ago. And, uh, a queen could have a fiefdom, right? Could have a contained, separate, we need to prosper, but nobody else does. But when that dimension awakens after consciousness embodiment, there is no protection, there is no separation, there is no preference, even. There's no preference, I guess. Um, and there is also, I think, uh, this this sort of spreading as the awareness of who we are and how we are spreads throughout our being. There are no more blinders. There has to be the recognition of, oh, this is all of who I am. For instance, the racist in me. I mean, that's also been a way create has been really useful for me, is to emerge and welcome shadows years ago and start to look at these parts of myself that I didn't want to see and nobody else wanted to see, although they could see them better than me. So yeah, so then the social dimension, and then the natural world, the sort of full circle of my first 10 years as an adult was spent in a back to the land decade experience, lifestyle choice. And a sort of a dawning recognition and respect for indigenous cultures, not really knowing a lot about them, but that, that awareness and knowledge has increased over the years. And I've had more and more exposure to some of those more integrated and whole ways of being. Um, yeah. Yeah, so it's this, it starts, there's both a one-pointedness and also um, an unlimited expansion that happens with awakening. So there's you know, my particular consciousness influenced by all the things it's influenced by, and then simultaneously the unlimited wholeness, expansion, ground of being. Um, I'm sort of getting a delta image, both brain waves and rivers, as consciousness kind of seeps and spreads out throughout my whole being, it hits each of those. Um, they're not barriers, they're just different. Yeah, what's the word I want? I can sort of see it mentally. It hits each of those receptacles. Let me call them receptacles. So there's the body, the embodiment receptacle, and then there's the social receptacle. And I think it is a receptacle in the sense that in the greater level, in the greater picture, that society wants and needs us awakening. It as a thing needs and wants us awakening. And then the natural world, I think, like I feel a relationship with the natural world that needs and wants us paying attention and awakening. I've just been mushroom hunting the last week or two with James, uh, and I've done it before, so I know how shut down I can be in the natural world if I'm thinking about things or I'm heading for a certain place or I'm with other people. And what happens when I open and I put on my mushroom eyes, and then all of a sudden I am connected to this entirety in a way that sometimes I'm not.
Mm.
Yeah, the queen's domain, and then the soul level, which is the ultimate as far as I know, as far as I've gone, and and uh, and again, this way that consciousness then illuminates, I guess, illuminates things that were maybe in the shadows or that I wasn't paying attention to. My purpose, my contribution. I mean, I've been thinking as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I felt probably not till my 30s, around 30-ish, when I really started doing my personal work, I felt this compulsion like that, was I supposed to work in this field? Was I supposed to, the wounded healer thing came up for me. And it's never been a direct correlation in my life, but there's always been threads of, and no surprise in my coaching world, I often attract women with similar histories and backgrounds. And now with my art, it's like my art has gone deeply into the feminine and the healthy feminine. Um, so, when I think about purpose, I think I had a pretty simplistic, wasn't a very soulful awareness in my 30s of what does purpose mean. And now with more perspective and many, many more years, I can see how purposeful each of the steps were in building to this, queen crone threshold um, in my life.
Yeah, I remember someone telling me you see your purpose in retrospect.
Yeah,
Oh, you
exactly.
can see the divine orchestration when you see, oh, this led to this, and here you are. And when you were talking about receptacles, like each of these dimensions being a receptacle, I felt in my body how my senses expanded. my sensory organism of being is just infinitely more nuanced and expanded since whole being realization.
Hmm. Hmm.
And sensing into the field of things. So you're mushroom hunting and your eyes are attuning, but your whole body is attuning. So you're sensing into the field of the woods, the energetic, all the smells, sounds, the whole thing is sort of like this um, wholeness that you're sensing into.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me what a loss it is into that musculature of sensing that happens when we're stuck on electronic media,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because it's not our imagination goes into the device, but not necessarily our whole organic sense system into the field. Like we recently had our Trillium Teachers Retreat, but we meet monthly. The teachers meet monthly on Zoom, and there's a certain amount of feeling into the collective that can happen on Zoom, and we do our best with that. But it's just shocking to me what a difference it is to be in a room of people and the bodies interbeing and the senses interbeing. So I feel like this is helping me articulate part of what I see as an awakened queen capacity is this in this heightened sensory beingness that goes into the field of whatever we're serving and responding to.
Yeah, it goes beyond the five senses, the six senses. I don't know how many, or I don't know if it's useful to have a number, but I'm thinking about last night. So in this packed auditorium full of people enthusiastic about, you know, Paul Stamets and Mike Bugh and their work in the world, which of course ties all of these dimensions together. I mean, there wasn't as much conversation about soul, but they're both older men looking back to and looking at their purpose in life and, the marks that they've made. But there was a sense of ecstasy, which I'm recognizing now. I wouldn't have said it last night because I wasn't tuned into it in a reflective way. I was just in the middle of it. But there was a transmission, and there was a feeling of ecstasy in a vibration, which Paul talked about at one point, the vibratory power of mycelium, which of course is not just mycelium, it's everything, right? It's us. And yeah, yeah.
For our listeners, watchers of this interview, would you mention just a little bit of who Paul Stamets is?
Yeah, so Paul Stamets is the founder of Fungi Perfecti, which is a product-based business, to some degree research-based, around fungi, and he's worked his whole entire career, 50 plus years, um, discovering species of mushrooms, exploring their capacities, both for human health, but also planetary health. He's worked with universities. He just spoke to the UN recently. He mentioned that. He worked for the Department of Defense for a while with microremediation. Um, so just a phenomenal guy, who is committed to the health of the planet, the health of the species, the health of the planet. Um, and a way shower and way ahead of his time in many ways. And then Mike Bugh is a professor who taught at Evergreen for 32 years and a mycologist who sort of fell into it in a kind of a funny way that he related last night. I wasn't familiar with his story before, but he sort of backed into mycology and then got very involved and has influenced many, many lives, through the university, through the state college, and having students that have gone on to do wonderful things themselves. So, yeah, it was a coming together of community in Olympia that are interested in all, you know, all mushrooms, mycology, but also psilocybin in particular, and the consciousness expanding potential of that medicine in the world, both its deep history and also its current, if you want to call it a renaissance or resurgence of interest. So it was a pretty electric um, event, and yeah, really beautiful.
Well, I want to earmark that, and I already know one of our next interviews, conversations will be about um, psychedelics and awakening, uh, and that relationship and how to work with psychedelics and, you know,
Mm.
pros and cons, limitations and possibilities, and how that can support our queenhood. So we're wrapping up here towards the hour, and I wanted to give people a taste of your gorgeous create right process. And for those of you who are on my mailing list or have on my Substack, and my Substack in particular, you will see what I call incantations,
Yeah.
where I read or recite a contemplation, and all those incantations that I've done and have posted come from this gorgeous create writing process from Joanne. So I couldn't thank you enough for that. It really is incredible medicine. So in closing, would you be willing to read one of your own rights?
I would be happy to. It benefits me to read it over and over again. So all the rites start with an intention. My intention was I express the sacred feminine in my creativity, in my relationality, and in my receptivity. So I mentioned earlier I'm working this feminine edge again. And then the rites start with a line of poetry kind of out of the blue or out of a book opened at random, and then the rite starts. So the line, she tends them with fierce care, born of fierce love. She stands tall and strong, her radiant mane flowing out of her lioness head. Her body is long, muscled, well loved, and well used. Some fear her, her fierceness, her beauty, her sovereignty. Some are drawn irresistibly to her presence, desiring her energy, her attention, her affection. She is sacred as she is mortal. She is divine as she is human. She tends her garden of earthly delights. She is fecund, abundant, and delicious. She whispers sweetly, softly, almost imperceptibly. She roars and writhes and stomps and storms. She is the irrepressible force of creation. Let her flow hotly in your veins. Let her use your body, mind, soul for deliverance. Let her in, penetrating, persistent, pleasurable. Shed her robes of resistance, her arbitrary boundaries, her history of subservience. Her time has come. Her time has come to guide your hands and heart. Her time has come to tame the wild winds of war, famine, disease, disruption. She knows how to love, to tend, to restore, to mend. She needs you. Yes, you. She needs your listening. She needs you tender. She needs you roaring. She needs your fierceness. She feeds your fierceness. She feeds your fire. She feeds your volcanic creative eruptions. She calls your molten lava into being. She creates through you. Surrender to her, surrender to her power, surrender to her purpose. She is the restorer. She is reparation. She is the bringer of balance. She is the bringer of beauty. Open, open your arms wide, open your heart, Open your mouth. Let truth ring out. Let rage resound. Let the mystery of her being manifest in you, through you, around you. Honor her, goddess of chaos, goddess of creation, mother of all and everything. Devote yourself to her expression. Let your every thought, word, and deed be an offering at her altar. Be a creator in her image. Be a creator of her image. Bring her into your very body. Invite her habitation. Make room for all she is. Let your cells ring with her joy. Let your body electric run her current. Give, give, give. What you have, what you are, what you create. Be her devotee. Be the grateful recipient of her gifts. Express what is given you. Make visible the beauty she wields. Make tangible the love she wields. Make available the power she wields. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
You're such a brilliant, creative, powerful, beautiful gift. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Bye for now.